Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Tanvi Taneja, coming up in the next hour. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar delivers stern message on Pakistan in Brussels, reframed the India-Pakistan conflict as India versus Terroristan, emphasizing India's zero-tolerance stance on terrorism.
I would urge you to make it, don't think of it as India-Pakistan, think of it as India-Terroristan.
Defence Minister Rajnath Singh slams the UNSC for naming Pakistan in anti-terror panel, says it's like asking a cat to guard the milk. Also suggests Pakistan to seek India's help if it can't deal with terror on its soil. Los Angeles protests continue for fifth day. Hundreds of Marines deployed to quell protests in the city. Partial curfew imposed, while Trump claims Los Angeles being invaded by foreign enemy. And in sports, South Africa and Australia lock horns in the World Test Championship final at the Lords in London. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar on Tuesday sharply criticized Pakistan during his official visit to Brussels, labelling it as Terroristan, while urging the international community to adopt a zero-tolerance approach towards terrorism and nuclear blackmail. Speaking at a joint press conference with EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, Jaishankar said that the current situation should not be viewed as a conflict between two states, but as India's response to terrorism.
This is not a conflict between two states per se. This is actually a response to the threat and to the practice of terrorism. So I would urge you to make it, don't think of it as India-Pakistan, think of it as India-Terroristan.
Kaja Kallas also reiterated the EU's strong condemnation of Pahalgam terrorist attack. She stressed that India has the right to protect its citizens in accordance with the law.
I want to reiterate the EU's strong condemnation of the terrorist attack in Pahalgam, Jammu and Kashmir. Those responsible must be held accountable. India has the right to protect its citizens in accordance with the international law.
The joint presser came as the two sides concluded the first India-European Union strategic dialogue. In all, the two sides held productive discussions on deepening cooperation in defence, maritime security, counter-terrorism, cyber and AI, space and defence industry collaborations. They also shared perspectives on Indo-Pacific, situation in Europe and West Asia. In all, Jaishankar stressed that as political democracies, market economies and pluralistic societies, India and the EU share many convergences in an increasingly multipolar world. Earlier, Dr. Jaishankar called on the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. The minister welcomed her strong condemnation of terrorist attack in Pahalgam and solidarity in combating terrorism. The two leaders discussed efforts underway to deepen the India-EU partnership. They also agreed on the potential benefits of stronger cooperation in trade, technology, connectivity and security for both their regions. Pointing to Operation Sindoor as a sign of change in the country's attitude towards national security, Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on Tuesday at an event in Dehradun urged international community to stop funding Pakistan. He said that a large part of this financial aid is spent on terrorism.
पाकिस्तान को जो पैसा या आर्थिक सहायता मिलती है, उसका एक बड़ा हिस्सा आतंकवाद के कारखाने में खर्च किया जाता है। और ये बात पूरी दुनिया के सामने आ रही है। पाकिस्तान को फंडिंग का मतलब है आतंकवाद के इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को फंडिंग। इसलिए मुझे लगता है कि अंतर्राष्ट्रीय समुदाय को कि इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी को इस फंडिंग को, विदेशी फंडिंग को बंद करना होगा। पाकिस्तान आतंकवाद की नर्सरी है, इसे अब खाद पानी नहीं मिलनी चाहिए।
Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has come down heavily on the United Nations for what he described as a shocking and ironic decision to appoint Pakistan as the Vice Chair of the UN Counter-Terrorism Committee. In a strongly worded statement, Singh said that the move is akin to making the cat guard the milk, especially when the world knows Pakistan's long-standing track record of sheltering and glorifying terrorists.
आज दुर्भाग्यवश हाल के वर्षों में यूनाइटेड नेशन ने के कई निर्णयों पर सवालिया निशान लग रहे हैं। साथियों, सबसे हालिया उदाहरण है कि संयुक्त राष्ट्र सुरक्षा परिषद द्वारा पाकिस्तान को काउंटर टेररिज्म पैनल का वाइस चेयर यानी उपाध्यक्ष बनाया गया है। और हैरानी की बात यह है कि यह काउंटर टेररिज्म पैनल 9/11 हमले के बाद गठित किया गया था। और हम जब जानते हैं कि 9/11 का हमला किसने किया था, और यह भी किसी से छिपा नहीं है कि उस हमले के मास्टरमाइंड को पाकिस्तान ने शरण दी थी। यह तो एक तरह से बिल्ली से दूध की रखवाली करवाने वाली बात है मित्रों। और पाकिस्तान को काउंटर टेररिज्म पैनल का वाइस चेयर और यानी उपाध्यक्ष बनाया जा रहा है। इससे बड़े दुर्भाग्य की बात क्या हो सकती है। आज मैं इस फोरम से कहना चाहता हूं कि इंटरनेशनल कम्युनिटी को इसका कॉग्निजेंस लेना चाहिए।
The defence minister went on to reiterate his previous advice to Pakistan, saying that Pakistan should seek India's help if it is unable to take action against terrorism on its soil.
भारत चाहता है कि आतंकवाद पाकिस्तान सहित पूरी दुनिया से खत्म हो, क्योंकि यह पूरी दुनिया के लिए एक गंभीर चुनौती है। साथियों, मैंने तो पहले भी पाकिस्तान को सलाह दी थी और आज मैं फिर से कहना चाहता हूं कि अगर आपसे पाकिस्तान में आतंकवाद के खिलाफ प्रभावी कार्रवाई नहीं हो पा रही है, तो भारत आपकी मदद करने को पूरी तरह से तैयार है। भारत की सेनाएं आतंकवाद के खिलाफ सरहद के इस पार और सरहद के उस पार भी कार्रवाई करने में पूरी तरह से सक्षम है।
Now, the Axiom 4 mission slated for launch today, that is 11th of June, for sending the first Indian Gagan Yatri to International Space Station has been postponed. Taking to social media, the Indian Space Research Organisation chairman, Dr. V. Narayanan, said, and I quote, as part of the launch vehicle preparation to validate the performance of booster stage of Falcon 9 launch vehicle, 7 seconds of hot test was carried out on the launch pad. It is understood that LOX leakage was detected in the propulsion bay during the test. Based on the discussion on this topic by the ISRO team with the experts of Axiom and SpaceX, it has been decided to correct the leak and carry out necessary validation tests before clearing the launch. Hence, the launch of Axiom 4 slated for 11th June for sending first Indian Gagan Yatri to International Space Station is postponed. Part of the team is India's Shubhanshu Shukla, who will become the first Indian to reach the International Space Station and only the second ever in orbit after Rakesh Sharma when the launch takes place. Axiom 4 mission, also known as Mission Akash Ganga, is a commercial spaceflight mission to International Space Station. The mission is being conducted by Axiom Space, a US-based company, and is a joint effort with NASA, SpaceX and ISRO. Prime Minister Modi-led government has completed 11 years in office. Up next, we revisit the government initiatives in revolutionizing transport infrastructure capabilities. India celebrates 11 years of transformative infrastructure development under the visionary leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It is a decade of reshaping India's landscape with world-class connectivity, engineering marvels and a future-ready foundation. We have a report.
Over the past decade, India has witnessed an unprecedented scale of infrastructure development driven by a holistic and integrated approach. India now boasts world-class roads, railways, airports, and more. From the Atal Tunnel to the Statue of Unity, these projects are not just about buildings and bridges, they are about building a stronger, self-reliant India that stands tall on the global stage. Major national initiatives like Pragati, PM Gati Shakti, the National Logistics Policy, Bharatmala, Sagarmala, and Udan have collectively shaped the vision of a connected and competitive India. This is not just about infrastructure, it is about laying the groundwork for a prosperous, connected, and sustainable Bharat. Let's amplify these milestones using 11 years of infra revolution and celebrate the monumental strides India has taken. Anchored in key policy reforms and mission mode projects, this transformation has not only expanded physical connectivity but also elevated economic productivity, reduced logistic costs, and enhanced service delivery. Now let's take a look at some of the major transformation in transport sector. PM Gati Shakti unified planning across 44 ministries and 36 states and union territories on a GIS-based platform. National highways grew by 60% from 91,287 kilometers to 1,46,204 kilometers. Highway construction pace rose to 34 kilometers per day. Bharatmala, 26,425 kilometers were awarded, 20,378 kilometers constructed. Now 7.8 lakh kilometers rural roads have also been completed between 2014 and 2025. PMGSY the fourth to connect 25,000 habitations by the year 2029. Not only this, 68 Vande Bharat trains are running across 333 districts. Now, over 45,000 kilometers of rail electrification also completed since the year 2014. If we talk about safety, Kavach has been deployed on key routes. 1,790 lifts and 1,602 escalators have been installed for accessibility. 88 airports have been operationalized under the Udan scheme. Over 1.51 crore passengers have been flown under regional connectivity. Digi Yatra adopted in 24 airports have over 5.22 crore users. Drone policy and MRO reforms boosting local aviation ecosystem. Port capacity also doubled to 2,762 MMTPA. Overall, vessel turnaround time improved from 93 to 49 hours. Green hydrogen hubs under development at 3 major ports, PIB ports. Sagarmala completed 277 projects and Sagarmala 2.0 has also been launched. And inland waterways cargo also rose by 710%. From record expansions in highways and expressways to the electrification of railways, greenfield airports, ropeway connectivity in hilly terrains, and smart digital platforms, the infrastructural push reflects the government's commitment to inclusive and sustainable development aligned with the goal of a Viksit Bharat by the year 2047. Bureau Report, DD India.
Hailing India's infrastructure revolution, Prime Minister Narendra Modi in a social media post said, and I quote him, "It's been 11 years of infra revolution with outstanding infrastructure being added that has enhanced India's growth trajectory. From railways to highways, ports to airports, India's rapidly expanding infra network is boosting ease of living and enhancing prosperity." Unquote. With the mercury showing no signs of easing, Delhi is likely to remain under extreme heat stress. The national capital on Tuesday recorded its highest maximum temperature of the season at 43.8 degrees Celsius. With heat wave conditions gripping the capital, the India Meteorological Department has warned that extreme heat is expected to continue in the coming days. The Weather Observatory has also issued an orange alert for heat wave for Delhi on Wednesday, with the maximum temperature for the day is forecasted to reach between 44 and 46 degrees Celsius. Dusty winds and heat wave warnings were issued across parts of Rajasthan, Punjab and Uttar Pradesh. As a 10-day early monsoon set in Kerala, record rainfall and gusty winds featured the coastal states, gradually progressing towards the northeast. Heavy rainfall with thunderstorms were predicted in Tamil Nadu, with northern regions of Andhra Pradesh being placed under orange alert by the IMD. The flood situation in Assam has improved marginally as the major rivers, including Brahmaputra, showed a receding trend due to decreased levels of rains in the past few days. The flood-affected victims have reduced to 1.6 lakh in 9 districts. The IMD has issued yellow alerts for all northeastern states. Heavy rainfall is likely at isolated places over Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, Assam and Meghalaya. Union Home Minister Amit Shah chaired a high-level meeting in New Delhi to review the preparedness of flood management in the country. The Home Minister also reviewed the long-term measures being taken to mitigate the menace of floods in the country and the steps taken on the decisions made in the meeting held last year. The Minister discussed new technologies adopted by all agencies for flood management and expansion of their network in the meeting. He emphasized on maximum use of space technology by various central agencies for flood control and water management. Still to come on DD India News Hour. US and China reach framework agreement on trade commitments in London. Jair Bolsonaro denies involvement in an alleged coup plot. And worsened by road blockades tied to the ongoing political unrest, fuel shortages in Bolivia continue for the 5th week.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy, always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the economic brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Tanvi Taneja. On to the United States now. Tensions are escalating for the 5th day in Los Angeles after protests against immigration and customs enforcement, ICE, gripped the city with demonstrators clashing with law enforcement. US President Donald Trump has deployed thousands of troops, including 700 active duty US Marines, to Los Angeles, despite California Governor Gavin Newsom saying that the move is unnecessary and will inflame the situation. Trump claimed that Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass paid troublemakers and agitators. In a hardline speech at an army base on Tuesday, Trump said that Los Angeles was being invaded by a foreign enemy and vowed to liberate the city after days of protests sparked by immigration raids.
Under the Trump administration, this anarchy will not stand. We will not allow federal agents to be attacked, and we will not allow an American city to be invaded and conquered by a foreign enemy, and that's what they are. A lot of those people were let in here by the Biden administration. They just poured right in. In Los Angeles, the governor of California, the mayor of Los Angeles, they're incompetent, and they paid.
An overnight curfew went into effect in protest-hit downtown Los Angeles on Tuesday. The city has seen 5 days of public protests since the Trump administration launched a series of immigration raids. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass announced a local emergency curfew in effect starting tonight. Bass said violence, crime and vandalism would not be tolerated, vowing that police would hunt down the wrongdoers. So these are live visuals coming from Los Angeles at the moment. Los Angeles in a state of unrest for the fifth consecutive day. We see here protesters, some of them even carrying the Mexican flags. Streets, although are being seen with a heavy police deployment, and Donald Trump vowing to liberate the city and calling the city, Los Angeles, being invaded by a foreign enemy.
I wanted to let the city know that I have declared a local emergency and issued a curfew for downtown Los Angeles to stop the vandalism, to stop the looting. Many businesses have now been affected by or vandalized. Last night, there were 23 businesses that were looted, and I think that if you drive through downtown LA, the graffiti is everywhere and has caused significant damages to businesses and a number of properties.
So these are National Guard troops on the streets of LA. California Governor Gavin Newsom on Tuesday condemned Trump's deployment of U.S. Marines and National Guard troops to Los Angeles. Newsom accused the president of bypassing state authorities and inflaming what had been a winding down protest movement.
Donald Trump, without consulting California law enforcement leaders, commandeered 2,000 of our state's National Guard members to deploy on our streets, illegally and for no reason. This brazen abuse of power by a sitting president inflamed a combustible situation, putting our people, our officers, and even our National Guard at risk.
Now, protests took place in other cities, including Chicago, New York, Washington, and Atlanta. Several thousand people took to the streets of New York to protest the immigration policies of President Trump after a series of raids by immigration officers. Protesters marched into Lower Manhattan, many carrying signs reading, "ICE out of New York," in reference to the Federal Immigration Police, whose raids to arrest undocumented immigrants have ramped up in recent weeks. The march in New York was more peaceful than its counterpart in Los Angeles, where ongoing demonstrations between protesters and police have spurred Trump to deploy thousands of National Guard troops and active duty Marines. New York Mayor Eric Adams said protests like those in LA are unacceptable and will not be tolerated if attempted in our city. Adams did not implement a Tuesday night curfew in New York, unlike his counterpart in Los Angeles. Jessica Taneja joins us with more perspective on the story. So, Jessica, we're already seeing these protests spiraling on to New York. And talking of Los Angeles, it is the second largest city in the U.S. where National Guard and Marines are called to quell the protests in Los Angeles for the fifth straight day now. What will be the implication of such a deployment for the rest of the country?
Well, it has huge implications if you see, even legally and otherwise, but to decode the events of starting from the weekend to now, what has now spilled over to this week as well, and protests not just in LA, and as you pointed out, in New York, in other cities as well. But in LA, it's not the first time that these kind of protests are observed. And if you see, it has been kind of difficult for the authorities on ground as well to discern between professional protesters and peaceful protesters. That has been a task at hand for them as well. And the reason that gives room to more uncertainty as to how this entire situation plays out of control of both the state and the federal government in no time. And you heard the California governor, who said that the curfew will remain till 6 a.m. Pacific time, and now that time draws close. And perhaps now would be, best to understand what the governor as well as President Donald Trump do when it comes to controlling the security situation on ground. There have been multiple reports from last night. There's been rioting, looting. One reported on an Apple store. A mob had entered the store and the police, the LAPD, had reached on ground. Right now, all kinds of law enforcement authorities, including the National Guard, 300 of them as per California Governor Gavin Newsom, as well as the Marines on standby, waiting for a command from the Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth, as well as President Donald Trump. There's a lot of uncertainty on the ground there, but at this point, these certainly look to be one of the biggest protests America has seen in the recent past. It has seen various protests, but nothing of the scale that would eventually lead to rioting on the streets. A big concern, and it also plays into the mess of security situation where the authorities are unable to discern who are the peaceful protesters protesting against the ICE agents who have been raiding the homes of those migrants who are working in garment factories in California, and as the other labor force that Los Angeles and other major cities of California really depend on, Tanvi.
Now, the state of California has sued Trump over the National Guard deployment, and Governor Newsom has slammed, quote, dictatorial Trump for his, quote, un-American move. So where is this state versus center tussle headed, Jessica?
Well, this break or fragmented relationship when it comes to the state and the federal authorities is perhaps, an overall picture of how the American politics are playing out at this moment. You look at domestically, there are observers and analysts who would go on to suggest that this is President Donald Trump targeting the blue states and, making sure that his election rhetoric of migration, which was in fact a promise and was to be converted into a policy, takes place. And the way the ground situation is in LA right now, it does give President Donald Trump much more room to convey to his core MAGA voter base that, look, here is where migration has completely gone out of control. And he is delivering on his election rhetoric, which was to curb migration, and especially on the Mexico border. You've seen people with Mexican flags, atop a car that was burned. These kind of images do sort of play into the domestic politics quite well. But apart from that, Gavin Newsom, the California governor, a blue state governor, has very categorically pointed out that this is the kind of federal intervention that will not be accepted, especially with the deployment of National Guards. And also to point out, Tanvi, the future of this entire issue, if it has to play out legally, will depend on the American Constitution and its rights, and particularly focus on the Posse Comitatus Act of 1887 that was brought into inaction just because of the kind of situation America was in terms of its civil war. So that act eventually disallows the federal government to deploy military on its own people on US soil. So that is something that will have to be looked over. But given the kind of precedents available to the President of the United States, Donald Trump, he could invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807 and might as well go ahead with deploying US troops, which is the Reserve Marines, currently stationed at the Pendleton base around LA. And that could become effectively a very different kind of mechanism and a tussle between a state authority and the intervention of federal authority when it comes to trying to manage issues of national security.
Of course, and we also would like to tell our viewers that Gavin Newsom is probably going to be one of the presidential candidates for next year's elections from the Democratic Party. So probably his stance to tackle Trump's moves to counter immigration is definitely not in line with his thought process. So therefore, he is giving a strong rebuttal of these protests. Jessica, of course, it's not the first time that such tussles between democratically ruled states and Trump administrations have happened. In fact, in the first term also, such tussles were seen very often.
Well, there have been protests even in the wake of Israel's occupation in Gaza, perhaps leading to an executive order by the President of the United States to not only curb immigration but also look at students who have anti-Semitic remarks on campuses and have much tighter control on the narrative at this point. But with this protest, Anvi, the way it has unfolded, we have seen, as you said, such protests in the recent past, but nothing to this effect where the second largest city of the country at this hour would still be in curfew. And this is, as you know, the Hollywood city, and much more rests on just its, the film capital of the world. There is a lot that this city is built on, and the neighboring cities, especially the migration issue, which has seen, time and again, which has led to time and again unrest in LA, but nothing of this extent in the recent past. So this certainly goes on to show that, there have been issues that have been unaddressed, especially when President Donald Trump is set to deliver on his election rhetoric of immigration control. And now that certainly seems to be taking shape, because he has said that he's not going to back down, and neither are his ICE agents, which are the Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, because of whose presence in the neighborhoods of the migrants created this entire issue, will certainly go on to, continue on that run till there is more force on ground. The protests, as we're given to understand, will continue, and the extent of how this moves forward and what kind of security situation now unfolds from here on will remain to see.
One thing is clear, voices of dissent are growing louder in the United States. Thank you very much, Jessica Taneja, for reporting on this story. Trade negotiations between the US and China continue for a second day in London following US President Donald Trump's the US and China have reached a preliminary trade framework after 2 days of talks aiming to implement earlier agreements. Both sides will now seek approval from President Trump and Xi Jinping. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on Tuesday that trade talks with Chinese officials in London would continue as needed. US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick echoed the development, describing the framework as a first step. Lutnick said that the trade framework and implementation plan agreed with China should result in restrictions on rare earths and magnets being resolved. The two sides have agreed in principle the framework for implementing consensus between the two heads of state during their phone talks on June 5th, as well as those reached at the Geneva talks. Now, Brazil's former president, Jair Bolsonaro, has denied his involvement in an alleged plot to overthrow the country's current president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Speaking for the first time in court, Bolsonaro, who ruled the country between 2019 and 2022, said that a coup was an abominable thing and there was never even a possibility of coup in his government. Along with 7 co-conspirators, Bolsonaro is standing trial over the events which led up to the storming of government buildings by his supporters on 8th January 2023, a week after Lula's inauguration. The former president could face decades in prison if he is convicted. He's always denied the charges against him. Violent clashes broke out on Tuesday in La Lagua, a mining town in Bolivia's Potosi province, as residents confronted Evo Morales' supporters who had blocked local roads. The confrontation, which lasted more than an hour, involved explosions from dynamite and rock throwing, resulting in several injuries. The protests were triggered by supporters of Morales demanding that the electoral court allow the former 3-term president to run in the upcoming elections, even though constitutional rulings bar him from seeking re-election. Residents and transport groups attempted to clear roadblocks that had disrupted food supplies for days. Meanwhile, fuel shortages in Bolivia have stretched into the 5th week, worsened by road blockades tied to the ongoing political unrest. These shortages are affecting water pumping and irrigation systems essential for both livestock and human use. Minister of Rural Development Yamil Flores stated the country is facing daily agricultural losses of 42 million Bolivianos. The situation, driven by dwindling dollar reserves and political tensions, pose a serious threat to Bolivia's rural economy and food security. We're heading for a short break here in DD India News Hour. We'll be back in just a bit. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Tanvi Taneja. Australia, along with its allies, imposed sanctions on 2 far-right Israeli cabinet ministers for their roles in serious human rights violations. Australia, Britain, Canada, New Zealand and Norway, in a coordinated action, imposed sanctions on Tuesday on cabinet ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, accusing them of repeatedly inciting violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. The sanctions freeze the assets and impose travel bans on Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, both West Bank settlers. On to the Russia-Ukraine conflict now. The Russian military said that their forces launched strikes on Ukraine's defense industry facilities and hit all the planned targets, while Ukraine claimed that its armed forces hit several Russian military personnel, weapons and equipment concentration areas over the past 24 hours. The Russian Defense Ministry said in its latest report that Russian forces thwarted multiple attacks from the Ukrainian military in directions such as Sumy and Kharkiv in northeastern Ukraine and Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, and launched attacks on temporary deployment sites in 151 areas of the Ukrainian military over the past 24 hours. On the same day, the Ukrainian Armed Forces General Staff reported 174 battles on the front lines over the past 24 hours. Ukrainian air and artillery units hit 16 Russia's personnel and weapons and military equipment concentration areas, 2 drone control centers, 4 artillery systems and a command post, it said. Russia and Ukraine exchanged an unspecified number of sick and wounded prisoners of war on Tuesday under an agreement reached at the peace talks last week in Turkey. The handover took place after an initial swap of prisoners under the age of 25 was conducted on Monday. So far, prisoner exchanges remain the sole tangible result of the peace talks, which have yet to make progress towards a ceasefire. Last month, the largest swap was occurred with 1,000 captives exchanged from each side. During last week's meeting, both parties also agreed to return the bodies of thousands of fallen soldiers, although this transfer has not yet happened. Residents of Austrian city of Graz remain in mourning as they held candlelight vigil on Tuesday night for victims of a school shooting in which 10 people were killed. Police said the suspect opened fire at a high school in southeastern Austria, who acted alone and took his own life in the school toilet. Police said they had found a goodbye letter addressed to his parents during a search of his residence, but that it included no clues about his motive. According to police, the alleged perpetrator used 2 legally owned weapons. Interior Minister G. Connor told reporters that he was a former student at the high school but had not finished his studies. Austrian Chancellor Christian Stocker declared 3 days of national mourning to remember the victims, saying the country had witnessed an act of unimaginable violence. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and the acting Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof expressed their condolences following the shooting. Schoof also said that his thoughts were going out to the relatives of the victims. On to South America now. Jennifer Geerling Simons, the opposition leader in Suriname, looks poised to become the next president of the oil-rich nation after her party secured the most seats in last month's legislative elections, according to official results. The country's electoral body, the CHS, announced that Simons' National Democratic Party won 18 of the 51 seats in Congress, surpassing the centrist VHP party of the current president, Chan Santoke. This victory positions Simons and the NDP to take the lead in Suriname's political landscape moving forward. Back to Europe. Thousands of demonstrators gathered outside the Hungarian parliament in Budapest on Tuesday to protest a proposed transparency bill put forward by Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government. The crowd, which included artists, musicians, actors and journalists, voiced concerns over what they see as threats to civil liberties. Protesters carried banners with slogans opposing the legislation introduced by the ruling nationalist Fidesz party on May 14th. The bill would require a registry of organizations receiving foreign funding and could limit or shut them down if deemed a threat to Hungary's sovereignty of cultural values. The proposal has triggered protests and prompted leading European editors to petition for its withdrawal. Argentina's Supreme Court confirmed the guilty verdict against Fernandez de Kirchner on Tuesday, sentencing her to 6 years in prison for defrauding the state and prohibiting her from holding any public office. Kirchner said that the Supreme Court upholding of her guilty verdict is wrong, arguing that her prison sentence will not change the lives of Argentinians. The Supreme Court's decision is a major setback for the left-wing Peronist politician, but could boost Argentina's opposition ahead of this year's midterm election. Kirchner was convicted in 2022 for awarding public roadwork contracts to an ally, but denies the charges, calling them political persecution. She recently announced her intention to run in September's legislative elections in Buenos Aires. Lawyers and families of Venezuelans detained in El Salvador sought legal updates on Tuesday, nearly 3 months after their deportation from the U.S. Venezuelan lawyers Walter Marquez and Reina Cardenas submitted a request to the administration of Salvadoran prisons to visit the detainees and gather information about their health and legal situation. The lawyers traveled to El Salvador, representing at least 6 individuals from the group of over 200 deported migrants who were arrested. The Trump administration appealed a judge's ruling requiring that hundreds of Venezuelans deported to El Salvador be allowed to challenge their detentions through habeas corpus petitions. Ecuadorian police inspect the crime scene where 8 people were killed in 2 armed attacks in the country's largest city, Guayaquil, amid escalating violence between rival criminal gangs vying for control over lucrative drug trafficking routes. The incidents left communities shaken and authorities scrambling to restore order. The attacks highlight the ongoing struggle between gangs battling for dominance over trafficking corridors, a conflict that has contributed to a recent surge in violent crime across Ecuador. Authorities are calling for increased cooperation with international partners to combat drug trafficking and restore peace to the city. The Philippine Senate voted to send the impeachment case against Vice President Sara Duterte back to the House of Representatives. The House impeached Duterte in early February on charges of graft, corruption and an alleged assassination plot against one-time ally and former running mate of President Ferdinand Marcos. A conviction which requires the support of 2/3 of the Senate's 24 members would mean her removal as vice president and permanent ban from public office for her. Tuesday's 18-5 decision came just hours after senators had taken their oaths as jurors and followed days of wrangling that had raised fears that the trial process was headed for derailment. And now artificial intelligence will help curb the spread of dengue fever and other mosquito-borne diseases, as delegates at the 8th Asian Dengue Summit in Manila will come with the innovation ideas to curb the menace. The summit will be held from June 15th to 18th. Dengue is a mosquito-borne tropical disease that kills about 20,000 people a year and infects hundreds or millions. At the University of South Florida, researchers are developing a mosquito trap that uses artificial intelligence to quickly identify the disease-carrying insects. This could be used as an early warning device for local authorities to alert public of the rise in risk to public health. Dense populations in cities exacerbate the spread of the disease, usually more common in the monsoon season from June to September. A rise in temperatures and longer monsoons, both linked to climate change, have caused a spike in mosquito breeding, driving the rapid spread of the disease. Greenland's ice sheet melted 17 times faster than the past average during a May heat wave that also hit Iceland, the scientific network World Weather Attribution said in a report on Wednesday. The Arctic region is on the front line of global warming, heating up 4 times faster than the rest of the planet since 1979. In Iceland, the temperature exceeded 26 degrees Celsius on May 15th, unprecedented for that time of the year on the subarctic island. For Greenland's indigenous communities, the warmer temperatures and melting ice affect their ability to hunt on the ice, posing a threat to their livelihood and traditional way of life. The changes also affect infrastructure in the two countries. In Greenland and Iceland, infrastructure is built for cold weather, meaning during a heat wave, ice melt can lead to flooding and damage roads and infrastructure. You're with us on DD India News Hour, still to come on the show. India's trade agreement with the European Free Trade Association to come into effect in October. In sports, England beat West Indies by 37 runs in the third T20 International to complete the 3-0 series sweep. And Australia and Brazil booked their ticket to FIFA World Cup 2026 in the USA, Canada and Mexico.
Jharkhand will mesmerize you with majestic nature, rich heritage and colorful culture.
Hello. Johar.
Johar. It fits perfectly.
Thank you.
Full workout ho gaya.
Ready?
Postcards from Jharkhand on National Geographic.
Thank you for being with us. You're watching DD India News Hour. I am Tanvi Taneja. On to some business news now. India's trade agreement with the European Free Trade Association, comprising Switzerland, Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein, will come into effect in October. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal on Tuesday emphasized that the agreement marks a new chapter in strengthening Indo-Swiss ties, paving the way for even greater collaboration ahead.
New era of partnership, of friendship, of togetherness between the 4 EFTA nations led by Switzerland, Norway, Liechtenstein and Iceland with India is going to begin in October when the TIPA, of course, it is officially called a Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement. I look upon this as a trust and efficiency partnership agreement.
On March 10, 2024, the two sides signed the Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement, which will lower or eliminate duties on various products, including Swiss watches, chocolates and cut and polished diamonds. He said this while addressing a gathering of 1,000 plus Swiss businesses at Swiss Mem Industry Day 2025, where he was joined by Swiss Federal Councillor Guy Parmelin. The minister also took the opportunity to highlight India's remarkable transformation over the past 11 years in terms of technology innovation and how our nation offers great avenues for doing business. Piyush Goyal also encouraged Swiss industry and businesses to explore unparalleled opportunities for growth and investment in India, leveraging India's skilled and talented workforce and facilitative business ecosystem. While Switzerland's State Secretary for Economic Affairs, Helene Badliger Artida, on Tuesday said that India is a preferred place for the Swiss industry. She highlighted India's huge consumer base and its firm economic growth.
We see certainly India as a preferred place for our industry because you are a democracy that helps. We feel united in values. You are an excellent consumer base. You have excellent growth. So we're very much interested in India. India with 1.4 billion consumers, with your economy growing, and we see also Minister Goyal this morning spoke about on how much people have been able to be lifted out of poverty and actually join middle class in India.
Share markets and the dollar on Wednesday offered a guarded welcome to the latest signs of progress in US-China trade talks while awaiting more detail of what was decided and whether it would stick for long. Bond investors were also hunkered down for a reading in the US inflation that could show the early impact of tariffs on prices and a treasury auction that will test demand for the debt. Investors who have been badly burnt by trade turmoil before offered a cautious response, and MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan rose 0.2%. Japan's Nikkei added 0.4% and Australian stocks firmed up 0.4%. The reaction in currency markets was equally restrained, with the dollar dipping 0.1% on the Japanese yen to 144.73. The euro edged up to $1.1433 and the dollar index held steady at 98.971 US dollars. And time now for some sporting action in DD India News Hour. Updates from cricket first. Australia will lock horns with South Africa in the World Test Championship final at Lord's in London. While the defending champions Australia will want to reclaim the title, South Africa will seek to clinch their first WTC trophy. Captain Pat Cummins on Tuesday announced their playing 11. Marcus Labuschagne is set to open the batting, while pacer Josh Hazlewood also returns to the squad. Marcus has been moved up the order to accommodate the return of Cameron Green, who underwent back surgery in October, while Hazlewood is fit again after a calf injury to replace Scott Boland. While for South Africa, they'll be eyeing their first ICC title since 1998. The Proteas finished at the top of the WTC 2023-25 standings, winning 8 of its 12 matches, while Australia came a close second with 13 wins in 19 games. With just 10 days left before the 5-match test series against England begins in the Leeds, Team India have started their red ball preparations in earnest in Beckenham. The team landed in England on June 7th. After 2 days of intense training, the squad was given a rest day on Tuesday. The team will resume its training on Wednesday. The series marks the dawn of a new era under skipper Shubman Gill and a relatively young Indian squad. Ahead of the test series, India A played 2 tests against England Lions, with the second unofficial test ending in a draw at Northampton on Monday. Team India will also play an intra-squad match before the series starts on June 20th at Leeds. Still with cricket, England wrapped up a series clean sweep with a 37-run victory over West Indies in the third T20 on Tuesday. Ben Duckett's inventive 84-run knock helped big-hitting England blast their way to a record score on home soil. He, along with Jamie Smith, shared a 120-run stand, which provided the backbone of England's total of 248 runs. Chasing 249, West Indies lost openers Evan Lewis and Johnson Charles Cheapley. Captain Shai Hope fought back with 45, while Rovman Powell launched a valiant counter-attack with unbeaten 79 runs. Despite Powell's efforts, Windies fell short at 211 for 8 as England's disciplined bowling ensured a convincing victory to wrap up a successful limited overs campaign. On to soccer now. Australia booked their 6th consecutive FIFA World Cup berth with a hard-fought 2-1 victory over Saudi Arabia on Tuesday. The Socceroos had to avoid a 5-goal defeat to confirm their appearance at a 6th consecutive final, and goals from Connor Metcalfe and Mitch Duke earned the Australians a come-from-behind win to brush aside the Saudis. The win confirms the Australians as second-place finisher in Group C behind Japan, who secured their spot at the finals in March. Saudi Arabia took 3rd place in Group C and will feature in a 4th phase of qualifiers in October alongside Indonesia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Iraq and Oman. Brazil on Tuesday qualified for next year's FIFA World Cup after beating Paraguay 1-0 in Sao Paulo. The 5-time champions became the 9th country to qualify for the FIFA World Cup in the USA, Canada and Mexico in 2026. Real Madrid forward Vinicius Jr. scored goal in the 44th minute to give Carlo Ancelotti his first win as Brazil head coach, that too on his home debut. The Selecao now sit 3rd in CONMEBOL, qualifying with 25 points from 16 matches and have confirmed a spot in the top 6, which are the automatic qualification places for the World Cup. With this qualification, Brazil continues to remain the only team to qualify for every edition of the FIFA World Cup. And that's all for this edition of DD India News Hour. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. Connect with us on our different social media handles at DD India Live. You can also download our DD India mobile app for quick news and updates from India and the world. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.